The galaxy was breaking. Centuries of fragile peace between alien empires had collapsed into brutal total war. The Zaltari Dominion, an empire of cold logic and ruthless ambition, swept across sectors with machine efficiency. Systems fell one by one, their defenders outmaneuvered, their fleets burned, their cultures absorbed or annihilated. Entire species fled their ancestral stars, reduced to refugees packed into rusting orbiters, begging for sanctuary. The alliance of free species, a once confident coalition, was unraveling beneath the weight of defeat. The Galactic Council, formed to mediate and preserve peace, had become a theater of desperation. Its grand chamber echoed less with debate and more with arguments and accusations. Long-trusted allies accused one another of cowardice, sabotage, and weakness. Offers of cooperation grew thin. Paranoia flourished. The once revered council was now a symbol of failure. Amid this chaos, humanity remained quiet. The Terrans had been a minor presence, newcomers with strange customs and an aggressive curiosity about everything. When they arrived, many species mocked them. Primitive. Ill-prepared. Emotionally erratic. Their diplomats talked too fast. Their soldiers lacked grace. Their ships were inelegant blocks of steel compared to the sweeping bioforms of the Solari, or the crystalline hulls of the Vantan. Still, humans had quickly learned the galactic tongue, adopted council protocols, and integrated economically with alarming speed. Yet when war erupted, Earth declared neutrality. That neutrality drew contempt from some quarters and relief from others. The Zaltari saw no need to waste resources on an unimportant world tucked near the galactic rim. Council members dismissed humans as talkers, not fighters. Still, a few quiet voices, those who had observed Terrans closely, warned that this perception was dangerously shallow. Human trade vessels traversed the war zones without fear. Their doctors volunteered aid to all sides. Their embassies remained open on both alliance and neutral worlds. And throughout it all, their diplomats watched. The most prominent of these observers was Ambassador Elena Mirek. She had attended every major council session since the war's beginning, a tall, unassuming woman with sharp eyes and a controlled demeanor. Her speeches were brief. She asked questions more often than she gave answers. She kept her species' opinions guarded, revealing little about Earth's internal stance. To most, she was forgettable. But those who paid attention noticed her patterns, the way she studied reaction, how she lingered after meetings to speak privately with key figures, how she constantly gathered information. When reports came in of Terran embassies helping to evacuate entire colonies under Zaltari siege, she never mentioned it. She didn't need to. Elena never brought emotion to the table, until the day the Kalari delegation arrived, wounded and broken. The Kalari homeworld had fallen. Their vast oceanic cities, once shimmering hubs of science and diplomacy, now lay in ruins. Their ambassador, voice trembling, begged the council for unified retaliation. No one offered assistance. Too many fronts. Too few ships. The war, it seemed, was already lost. All eyes eventually turned to the human representative. Elena had not spoken during the entire session. When she rose, silence fell across the chamber, not out of respect but habit. Her voice, calm and deliberate, broke the tension. From the beginning, we were told this was not our fight. That our youth as a species made us irrelevant in matters of war. That neutrality would keep us safe. We listened. We waited. We watched. No one interrupted. She continued. We saw what the Dominion did to pacified worlds. We saw what your peace terms led to. And we have seen how courage falters when hope dies. The silence sharpened. Earth has made its decision. Her eyes passed over every representative. We are joining the war. The declaration did not arrive with fanfare. No flourish. Just finality. Gasps followed. A few scoffed. One delegate, an Uroth tactician, openly laughed. But the Kalari ambassador, still bleeding from a plasma wound, wept openly. Elena gave no further justification. She gathered her data slate, bowed, and left the chamber. Behind her, the council erupted into chaos. But on Earth, the decision had already been made. Military factories lit up across continents. Reservists were called in. Old treaties were reactivated. Civilian corporations shifted production lines overnight. Entire satellite rings were cleared to make way for new platforms. A shadow fleet, long in preparation, emerged from classified shipyards hidden behind Neptune's orbit. Prototypes no longer bound by secrecy were greenlit for combat. The Terran response was not spontaneous. It was coordinated, rehearsed, inevitable. While the galaxy dismissed them, humanity had studied war, not just technology, but patterns, weaknesses, psychologies. They had mapped every battle, simulated every outcome, and prepared for every failure they had witnessed. Every council session had been reconnaissance. Every aid mission, a data-gathering operation. They had been silent not because they were unwilling, but because they were not ready. Now they were. And for the first time in recorded history, the rest of the galaxy would see what a united Earth meant when it chose to stand. The chamber was thick with tension, a pressure more oppressive than gravity. The aftermath of the Kalari collapse had shattered whatever illusion of control the Galactic Council once clung to. Delegates from nearly 100 species filled the central hall, some silent, some shouting, most visibly unraveling. The alliance was bleeding, and no one could agree on how to stop it. The Zaltari envoy, draped in ceremonial alloyed armor, addressed the assembly with a calculated calm that only deepened the wound. His voice was mechanical, devoid of empathy. Surrender ensures survival. Resistance ensures extinction. The Dominion is prepared to absorb compliant territories without retaliation. Offer your systems, and you will retain minimal autonomy. The words were brutal in their clarity. They were not a negotiation. They were the terms of conquest dressed in protocol. Several species wavered. 2 systems quietly disconnected their feeds. The Yalvier, long proud warriors, now shifted toward abstention. Even the Vanten, architects of the crystalline star shields, voiced doubts about further conflict. Fear had saturated the Council's veins. Amid the swirling collapse, the Terran seat remained still. Elena Mirek stood. No preamble. No announcement. Just movement, sharp, unhesitating. The murmurs dulled, eyes turned, and for a moment the chamber held its breath. I have listened to every word spoken here, she began, her voice cutting through the tension like steel. I've heard appeals to logic, calls for retreat, cries for mercy, and promises of conditional survival. I understand your fear. But understand this, Earth does not negotiate with extinction. The Zaltari envoy tilted his head, subtly, as if to process a malfunctioning signal. Mirek continued, unblinking. Every system that surrendered lost more than sovereignty. You lost your voice. Your culture. Your history. Compliant worlds are not spared, they are erased. Assimilated. Rewritten. Her words echoed without resistance. We were advised to remain neutral. We were told our absence from war was a wise delay. That we should learn, observe, adapt. We have done so. We have measured every defeat. We have studied every mistake. And we now understand one simple truth: if we do nothing, the war comes to us anyway. A hum built across the chamber, not volume, but awareness. A shift in the tone of listening. Elena Mirek, are you implying a policy shift? Asked the Avalari delegate, her feathers rippling with unease. No, Elena said. I am declaring it. She turned to face the Zaltari envoy directly. Earth is joining the war. A silence followed, not contemplative, but stunned. It was not the words that struck hardest. It was the confidence behind them, the certainty that the speaker had already moved beyond debate. A hiss of disbelief broke from the Yulathai representative. Your species has no fleets of legend. No weapons that turn stars. What, exactly, do you offer? Sympathy? Mirek didn't flinch. We offer resolve. And we offer consequence. The words were deliberate, firm, and final. You've mistaken our silence for submission. It was preparation. We do not march blindly into unwinnable battles. We do not charge for glory. We act with purpose. When we stand, we do not retreat. No dramatics. No threat. Just assurance. We are not here to be saved. We are here to win. A flicker of unease crossed the Zaltari Envoy's expression. He recalculated. You believe your intervention alters outcome? That your limited forces will shift the tide of a war that spans galaxies? Elena's reply came without delay. No. We know it will. She stepped down without waiting for response. Her statement was not an argument. It was a warning. Back on Earth, encrypted channels lit up with activation codes. Logistics networks pivoted from simulation to execution. Civilian traffic rerouted in seconds. Conscription systems, dormant for decades, pulsed with renewed authority. Non-combatant nations declared support with unexpected speed, following a signal they hadn't heard in generations. This had not been a spontaneous declaration. The moment had been chosen. Not for symbolism. For effectiveness. Humanity had studied every alliance failing. They had measured the pace of Dominion advancement, and calculated exactly when their entry would have the most destabilizing effect. They were not arriving to save the galaxy. They were arriving to prevent its collapse. What stunned the Council was not the announcement. It was how quickly the consequences unfolded. Human expeditionary fleets vanished from Sol's orbit in less than an hour. Orbital logistics depots previously designated for science missions began unloading heavy-class weaponry. Trade convoys repurposed into mobile command hubs reappeared deep in Allied sectors before the Council even processed official confirmations. Even more unsettling was the news that several Earth-aligned mercenary factions had already engaged Dominion scouts without waiting for orders. Reports began flooding in from the front. Strange ships and Terran formation patterns were seen flanking Alliance skirmish lines. Dominion communications were being jammed by unfamiliar frequency arrays. Salvaged weapons were showing up with modifications no other species had considered: optimized, brutal, effective. In the chaos of war, Earth did not request permission. They moved. They did not need applause. They did not wait for alliances to adapt. They had already chosen the role they would play. Not observers. Not victims. Not saviors. Humans had joined the war not because they were desperate, but because they had decided enough was enough. Maras 9 was considered lost. The last remaining Alliance regiment had retreated into a defensive shell, surrounded on 3 fronts by Zaltari war hosts. Supply lines severed, reinforcements non-existent, morale shattered. Most command units had already marked the planet as a strategic write-off. Local populations braced for subjugation or extermination. The Zaltari knew their victory was inevitable. They had deployed containment fleets, orbital suppression units, and atmospheric drone swarms. Their algorithms calculated a 97% probability of total collapse within 2 rotations. The siege would complete itself. Then the interference began. Orbital drones lost synchronization. Long-range scans returned blank. Shield harmonics destabilized. Within minutes, Dominion Command began issuing countermeasures, convinced they faced a solar anomaly or Alliance desperation gambit. What they didn't expect was the human arrival. There were no grand declarations. No advanced transmissions. Human ships dropped in, silent, block-shaped carriers with no aesthetic, no insignia, no ceremony. They deployed immediately, without establishing contact. Dropships peeled off like falling meteors, scattering toward key impact zones. Troop formations spread in layered waves, some occupying broken Alliance positions, others establishing entirely new fronts. The first thing the Zaltari noticed wasn't fire, it was confusion. Communication channels flickered, jammed by low-frequency pulses targeting Dominion relay thresholds. Visual sensors were scrambled by white noise fields and kinetic chaff patterns unfamiliar to Dominion systems. Predictive models collapsed as human patterns failed to match any known doctrine. Then the fire came. Human infantry didn't march, they advanced. Efficient, staggered, unrelenting. Their armor absorbed direct hits, but more disturbing was their movement. Terrans didn't seek cover, they created it. They dismantled debris mid-combat, repurposing it as barricades, camouflage, or explosive traps. They didn't retreat when flanked, they collapsed the flank with misdirection and redirected fire zones. Their weapons, though less elegant than Dominion energy systems, were vicious in execution. Ballistic projectiles designed to fragment on impact disrupted Zaltari regenerative plating. Their drones weren't networked, they were semi-autonomous, with individual threat logic, immune to Dominion jamming. Human air support didn't carpet bomb, it precision struck, down to the meter, often coordinated from ground units manually feeding targeting data in real time. The battle shifted not in scale, but in rhythm. Dominion troops accustomed to pattern resistance found themselves unable to anticipate the next strike. Terran squads appeared in unexpected zones, hit hard, vanished, and re-emerged elsewhere within hours. They moved fast, not with teleportation, but by optimizing logistics on the ground, forward mobile rearmament units, on-the-fly refabrication of armor, instantaneous battlefield triage. Alliance troops, long resigned to death, watched with disbelief as human medics pulled Kalari officers from collapsed trenches and treated them mid-engagement. Human engineers reinforced defensive lines while under artillery fire. No one waited for a clear zone, they operated in chaos, and they excelled in it. Dominion counterforces attempted direct confrontation. They lost. In one sector, a Dominion heavy column faced a single Terran armored unit. Within 40 minutes, the Dominion's command tank had been destroyed, 2 flanks collapsed, and the retreating units pinned in crossfire from improvised emplacements. Human soldiers advanced in teams of 6, leapfrogging over one another's fire arcs, coordinating without centralized direction. The psychological toll was immediate. Dominion troops accustomed to overwhelming supremacy faltered. Units hesitated to push forward. Several commanders rerouted forces to avoid contact with human positions altogether. Human units didn't just resist, they reversed momentum. They operated with a brutality that wasn't born of cruelty, but intent. Their efficiency was terrifying. Every action, every maneuver, had purpose. Nothing was wasted. Alliance Command, watching from orbital outposts, couldn't make sense of it. Earth hadn't just deployed troops, they had deployed doctrine, mindset, infrastructure. They hadn't joined the war to assist. They had come to win. Within a day, Maras 9 was no longer considered a loss. Within 3, Dominion forces withdrew entirely. The Council scrambled to analyze the shift. Reports flooded in. Terran troops had stabilized 6 fronts in 72 hours. Human war doctrine spread rapidly among Allied units. Copies of Terran logistics protocols were requested by over 24 species. Human battlefield manuals became strategic gospel overnight. The Zaltari classified their initial encounters as statistical anomalies. Until it happened again. And again. Each time, the pattern repeated: disruption, confusion, assault, stability. The fear wasn't in how humans fought. It was in how quickly they turned chaos into control. In a theater of war defined by attrition and desperation, the arrival of Earth introduced an element the Dominion hadn't accounted for: relentless momentum. Terrans didn't stall enemy forces. They uprooted them. And when the dust settled, human units didn't celebrate. They didn't raise banners or issue statements. They moved on to the next fight. Quiet, calculated, and utterly focused. The Dominion, for the first time since the war began, issued internal directives not on how to win, but how to survive contact with human forces. The Dominion had never faced an opponent it couldn't outmaneuver. Their strategy depended on overwhelming force, calculated aggression, and the predictability of alien resistance. Every war before had followed a pattern: break communications, fracture unity, press until submission. Against the humans, none of it worked. What began as battlefield losses turned into strategic miscalculations. The Zaltari adapted as they always had, through algorithmic analysis and tactical evolution. Their AI reviewed human engagements, mapped every known formation, and projected new countermeasures. None of them held. Humanity didn't just shift tactics, they erased previous models entirely. Units deployed one day with aggressive flanking maneuvers and returned the next using guerrilla dispersal. Squads that operated as cohesive platoons fragmented into decentralized cells, sharing no visible command structure but achieving unified outcomes. No observable hierarchy, yet perfect synchronization. The Dominion's AI flagged the data as inconsistent. Resimulations produced failure rates exceeding 90% against Terran responses. Human battlefield logic was nonlinear. It wasn't just unfamiliar, it was anti-patterned. When Dominion forces adjusted energy dispersal fields to account for human projectile clusters, the Terrans switched to close-quarters shock engagements, using terrain to nullify line-of-sight targeting. When they hardened armor to resist kinetic strikes, humans stopped shooting and began dismantling power grids, disrupting entire encampments with silent infiltration. There was no clear doctrine, just adaptability. The deeper threat wasn't in the weapons. It was in the thinking. Dominion analysts captured combat footage where human engineers reprogrammed Zaltari drones mid-battle using code fragments scavenged from the wreckage. They turned enemy reconnaissance assets into decoys, led entire squadrons into kill zones crafted from their own tactical blind spots. One report documented a Terran squad impersonating a Dominion command signal to reroute artillery fire onto its own rear lines. No other species weaponized psychology like this. Dominion discipline, once seen as a strength, became a liability. Humans exploited its rigidity. They mimicked distress calls and perfect Zaltari tone patterns, drawing elite units away from actual engagements. They left behind false intelligence, encrypted with Dominion dialects, timed to trigger confusion when analyzed. They didn't just fight, they manipulated enemy expectation until it collapsed. The term, ghost units, began circulating among Dominion ranks. Human forces that appeared in sensor shadows, struck with surgical precision, then vanished without trace. No footprints. No communication records. Just outcomes. Entire garrisons rendered inoperable before ever firing a shot. Morale suffered. Internal data logs revealed spikes in command override requests from frontline commanders. Officers hesitated to engage Terran units without full reinforcement. Lower-tier soldiers refused orders to pursue into territory recently occupied by human forces. The psychological resistance spread faster than any biological contagion. Meanwhile, humans integrated with Alliance troops with unsettling efficiency. They didn't take command, they enhanced. They rebuilt logistical systems using modular code compatible with dozens of species. They repaired crippled outposts overnight. They provided strategies that didn't rely on sheer firepower but timing, misdirection, leverage. Every suggestion backed by proof. Even their presence shifted behaviors. Alliance species known for caution began holding ground longer. Units who had previously retreated in the face of Dominion armor now counterattacked, relying on human support they couldn't fully understand but trusted instinctively. Confidence returned, not through speeches, but through results. Dominion leadership could not quantify the new threat. The Terran war model didn't rely on numerical superiority or technological edges. It depended on chaos, harnessed and shaped, not feared. Where other species broke under confusion, humans operated more efficiently. Where others required clear orders, humans anticipated outcomes before instructions were complete. Their unpredictability made them dangerous. Their precision made them feared. But their resilience made them something else entirely. Human casualty reports baffled analysts, not because they were low, but because they continued to operate effectively under conditions that had previously ensured collapse. Units reported full mission success even with 60% operational losses. Survivors adapted roles, absorbed command, redistributed tasks without hesitation. Morale remained stable. In some cases it improved. No centralized dependency. Just persistence. Captured Dominion officers described human prisoners who refused to speak under pressure, not from defiance, but clarity. One repeated a single line, asterisk. "We are not done yet." Asterisk. Another spent 3 hours mentally mapping Dominion floor plans from memory, later used in a breakout that disabled an entire holding facility. These were not anomalies. They were a pattern that defied analysis. The Dominion had always counted on superiority, in numbers, in systems, in control. They had never faced a threat that operated best when control was absent. Now, they were facing the consequences. Humanity was not just another combatant. They were the variable that broke every model. The final offensive began without prelude. No countdown, no symbolic gathering. Human command distributed strategic points across dozens of sectors simultaneously, each tailored to fracture Dominion control from within. There was no singular target. Every engagement served a broader disruption, dismantling support chains, collapsing logistics, and isolating strongholds. Human coordination with the Alliance had reached unprecedented integration. Mixed species task forces no longer required translators or protocol clarification. Terran systems handled real-time synchronization, allowing simultaneous assaults from fleets that had never shared a battlefield before. Entire squadrons moved with shared awareness, responding to threats with collective precision. Alliance Command shifted its nerve center to orbit above the formerly besieged world of Careen 6, now fully under joint control. From there, operational orders spread instantly, but most followed prearranged directives laid out by Terran strategic architects. Victory was not dictated, it was executed step by step, long before Dominion forces even recognized the pattern. On the front lines, Dominion cohesion unraveled. Orders contradicted each other. Supply corridors collapsed under targeted strikes to temporal anchor points, an idea the Zaltari had never considered exploitable. Their attempt to adjust led to resource bottlenecks that choked entire sectors. Elite commanders were isolated from core decision hubs, forced to make frontline calls for which they were never trained. Humanity didn't just outfight them, they made them irrelevant. Neutral species, once paralyzed by fear or indecision, began aligning openly with the Alliance. Systems that had declared neutrality for cycles now offered orbital yards, refueling stations, or stealth data routes. Some had been secretly preparing for this moment, counting on Earth to trigger the shift they couldn't risk themselves. The Galactic Council, fractured for so long, reconvened with a different tone. Where chaos had once ruled, order began to settle, not from dominance, but from clarity. The Terran delegation no longer sat in silence. They issued briefings, plans, threat assessments, and long-term stabilization frameworks. Even traditionalist factions, once skeptical of human involvement, began requesting their analysts for homeworld defense planning. Elena Mirek addressed the Council again, not as a solitary voice, but as the architect of the galaxy's last coordinated push. "We did not enter this war for vengeance," she said. "We joined because watching injustice in silence is not peace. We joined because survival should never demand submission." Her statement was archived in every major database, replayed across embattled systems, and memorized by resistance fighters who had nearly given up hope. Dominion Command issued blackout orders in response. They began deploying shock tactics, sending entire fleets on suicide assaults to delay the inevitable. Some units attempted scorched earth protocols on receding worlds. But even those actions backfired. Human cyber teams penetrated failsafe codes, disabling annihilation sequences mid-process. On one world, Terran operatives not only neutralized the detonation signal, they repurposed the energy grid to reroute Dominion reinforcements into ambushes. Entire battlefronts no longer fought for territory but for preservation of memory, language, and culture. Humanity understood this instinctively. On retaken worlds, they didn't install garrisons, they restored libraries, hospitals, data banks. Every reclaimed archive was treated as a living species asset, not a trophy. This shocked former allies. Most had forgotten war could be fought to protect, not just to win. The Dominion's grip fractured under its own weight. Not because its fleets were inferior, but because their certainty had always rested on the absence of resistance beyond brute defense. Now they faced something unyielding, not out of desperation, but purpose. The collapse wasn't cinematic. It was incremental. Sector by sector, node by node, Dominion presence faded, not through surrender, but through systemic failure. Isolated commanders requested extraction and received silence. Autonomous war engines self-terminated, deprived of logic loops sustaining their operational priority. And when it was over, there was no triumph. No celebration. Human troops didn't raise banners or demand recognition. They helped rebuild what remained. They provided food before tactical updates. They restored water systems before communication arrays. Entire species watched as the same force that had devastated the Dominion now sat beside orphans, repaired schools, translated ancient texts left unread for decades. For the first time since the war began, silence returned, not out of fear, but peace. In one report filed by a Zaltari archivist, now a defector turned historian, a single line concluded his final log. It was not their weapons that ended us. It was the day she stood before the council and spoke without anger, without threat, and still, every empire listened. Humanity didn't rewrite the galactic order with conquest. They reshaped it with conviction. They had not joined the war for power. They had joined it to make sure no one else would have to.